This is the Zemar Podcast. Elite Benefits of America helps small and mid-sized companies with their health insurance programs. And now, your host, Butch Zemar.
There's a lot of times we work hard, but sometimes the outcome is never what we expected. It could be as little as when we set goals. It could be projects around the house. It could be projects in the business, right? We work so hard to try to achieve a result, and you may not have anything to show for it. Every year, January, gym membership skyrocket. It happens every year. Everybody gets motivated. The new you, new year, right? And so, by March, if not sooner, it's just a ghost town in those gyms, right? People just start giving up, and a lot of times they just give up too soon. It usually takes more effort than originally planned or hoped. You always underestimate the amount of effort it takes to get those results. And so, but you decide you're going to put a stake in the ground, you're going to do something, and then you don't get the results from it. And other times, you feel like you're in quicksand. You keep moving, but no matter what you do, you never make any progress. In some cases, you move backwards. And we see this everywhere, right? So some couldn't be a business owner, but they're a great employee leader. Right, it happens all the time, and you'll see a lot of employees that I met them in our industry, outside the industry, where they're very profitable for an insurance company, but they can never do it on their own. Some want to run a marathon, for those out there that want to, but for some one reason or another, they can't do it, and it happens, right? So they end up capping out at 10 miles or something, or 5K, right? Just they don't have it for many different reasons, whether it's willpower to push past, could be body structure, could be a number of things. Time, you need time on your feet and you don't have it available. So there's a lot of reasons for that. At one point in time, I wanted to be an astronaut, and so I read all the astronaut books in the local library or the library at the school I was attending. All those books that were in there were older, apparently, because it told me, talked about certain astronauts and how they got to NASA, and all of them were prior military. All of them, in most cases, were in aviation, whether they were a technician or a pilot, test pilot, and a whole number of things. So I decided, well, I'm going to go out and join the military, right? So it wasn't until I was in the military when I realized I took the long path, and part of it was misleading by the recruiter, if you can imagine that. But the other part, I started to realize that I read all the old books, right? I didn't read the newer books from the 80s. And so the path to astronaut definitely was changed. And obviously, no matter what I did, if I got there at all, I would be probably aged out of the program. And obviously, the stories keep going on, right? And so there's also the times where you try to force things to happen, right? And sometimes you get success with that, and you do. That's why some people muscle it up and they man up. Just a couple of cliche terms, and they try to push things through, right? But there are other times when you try to force things to happen, and it ends up being worse than not doing it at all. Running, for example, right? If you push too hard too early, right, it could do some damage, whether just, do damage to your, just from a mental capacity or physical. And so some people try to jump too far, and so they've never ran more than a couple miles and they jump to 15. You could probably get away with it once, but if you do it repeatedly, it could run into some issues. You got to get some training under you. And then a lot of times, us men, we're trying to unscrew something, whether with a, screwdriver or a wrench, and we try to muscle it. Muscle, right? We got man muscles. We're going to push this thing, right? And the head of it breaks, or the bolt breaks off of it, and then now you got a bigger project than you originally planned, or you're just going to say, forget it, I'm done with this. I'm just going to leave it alone. Years ago, when I worked in the scuba shop, there was a regulator I was working on, and this thing just kept pushing, just couldn't get the screw out, right? Just kept pushing and pushing. It was on the inside of the, kind of like a chamber. Kept pushing and pushing, and of course I'm like, man, I'm in my early 20s at this point. I'm like, I can muscle this thing. I got this thing, right? So not only did it finally break loose, I cut my hand, and thankfully it wasn't that bad, but it took a little while to heal, and I actually damaged the inside of the chamber. We were able to fix it, but somebody else had to jump in because I didn't know how to do it. And then that guy that jumped in and fixed it, he always says, in most things in life, if you have to put more effort into pushing or unscrewing some or unbolting some or whatever, the chances are you got to stop and take a look because you may be doing it wrong, and that's why it didn't work to begin with. And I would say 80 to 90% of that of the time, that's 100% true, because there's many times you take a step back and you're like, all right, why is this giving me such a hard time? Sometimes you just look at it from a different angle and it works, right? So other times it could take you right down a dark path of a rabbit hole, spending countless hours, and in the end, you finally get to the other side, and let's say you finally finish whatever that rabbit hole is, and you get zero results for it, right? And it's definitely defeating. But this definitely happens in business. Many things. Sales is definitely a funnel that, or a program that you could push and not get all the results. I mean, there's some really busy salespeople out there in all kinds of industries, and they have zero sales for it. And it's amazing to me. I know, even us, when we push too hard, there's times we're overthinking, overprocessing, over manpowering things, and then we have to step back, right? And then we see what's going on because we're not getting the results that we're looking for. And then other times we don't even try and we get results. So it's just a mixed bag. But specifically when we look at, benefits programs, this happens all the time, right? And so I got a couple case studies I'll walk through with you that we had recently that might shed some light for some listeners out there and getting second opinions because where you're at today may not be where you should be tomorrow. So we beat our heads, against the wall, and we try to cut our costs with healthcare, but keep coverage good, right? I always say it's the American way. You want to cut your costs, keep health insurance great, right? It's getting harder and harder for all kinds of size companies, right? Large companies could definitely do it. There's strategies and processes that are going to input that could reverse that trend if they just open their minds. We've had a case study on here with Purdue University where they averaged 1% increase for, I don't know how many years, but at least 5 years because they revamped and created different process and procedures for it. They got a big team working on it, but still they figured out a way to manage the rate of return on it. But for other companies, it's just tough, just tougher and tougher each year. It just seems like, healthcare is going up faster than anything else in the company. And then, of course, all their employees that are insured on it, the cost goes up for them as well. We recently had a current client, about 75 employees. The renewal went up over 50% because of some claims going on between a few of the employees. We don't know who they were, but we just know they're tens of thousands of dollars. And definitely over the course of a year, we'll get into six figures. So the premiums obviously went up because of that, right? We went to every company we can possibly get our connections on. We went to a ton. And so based on the risk they were having, most of them declined to even quote the business because of the risk. Or the premiums were coming out equivalent or similar to their current insurance companies. And so it was just a rough battle all the way through. So we even tried to negotiate with some of the personal connections we had and say, come on, leverage our relationship kind of thing. Let's see what we could do. In this case, there was no luck. The risk was too much. And they didn't know when the risk was going to end, too. So it's not like somebody has a procedure and then it's done. It's something ongoing. So we did press on, and we even went to companies we never had a relationship with. We asked counterparts in the business and see who they were connected with, and just no results, right? And because of the risk, it wasn't because of us or what we were trying to do. It's just the risk of the company. It was no positive results that came out of it. But we kept fighting, right? So we ended up finding a solution. We had to move them back to fully insured. It brought the premium or the renewal increased from 54% down to about 28%. We had to make some plan changes, but it was overall the account was satisfied with the results given the situation, right? And that's one thing that's nice about having level funded or self-funded plans is you get these claims reports, right? So if a carrier comes back with a 15% increase, there's a little bit of a justification why, and we can use that to our advantage. In some other cases, like in this one, it's 50+%, and then we can look at it and say, holy smokes, there's some really good claims going on. So in this case, we went down a rabbit hole and we came up with some reasonable results, right? We had progress and we made the best of what was there. And like I said, the account was satisfied with those results and things, went in the right direction for them. And then we'll see what next year holds. Maybe we can balance it back and move it back. We'll have to see how that goes. We also had a new business situation recently where they said they never heard from the broker. Somehow through connections, they end up calling us, and the biggest pain was they were trying to look to save money. So we had all the employees fill out applications saying, okay, let's get some health history. They were a smaller company, and so we needed some health history involvement instead of some of the larger ones. They do like a database check. It's kind of like a credit report, but they don't check the credit report. It's just based on risk analysis that they use and trends that they have data on. So we went to close to 10 companies to see if we can underwrite this case, right? It's a lot for the size of the company. And most brokers won't go that far, but we made an honest effort, and it was a good connection. So I want to make sure that we were doing what we needed to do. And every single one of them were declined. Every one. They would not quote the business too high of a risk, not enough premiums. The list goes on, but they would 100% of them declined it. So we basically had to stay with the same fully insured company that they were with. And there's three main fully insured companies, at least in the state of Illinois. And so why trade, an apple for an apple? So we just stayed with the same company, but we made some plan changes. And so we were trying to look at opportunities to save money. That was their biggest pain. Well, looking at what they had, they were literally on the most expensive plan that insurance company offers. It was the most expensive plan they run. I think it was crazy. And then the employer was funding it. It's like, well, hold on here. Like, you're asking for lower costs, but you created your own problem at the end of the day. So let's make some changes on it, right? So we modified some of the plan offers, making more available as well, and then when we changed the contribution structure. So kind of what we did was we took a lower cost plan that was reasonable and where most of the employees or all the employees in an area that all the providers were in it. So we didn't have provider network issues. And so the employer ended up taking some of the funds and then compensating a little bit more on those plans to create a financial incentive to actually go with the lower cost plans. And then created a financial disincentive a little bit to do the buy-ups, right? We still had employees that did the buy-ups because they wanted that coverage. They wanted that richness of plans. So having said that, though, a lot of the other ones, they went to the lower cost plan because they paid less for it. And they weren't really using it anyways. And so they kind of just went with that option to begin with. I'm not saying all employees are like that, but in this case, it worked out. And then obviously the buy up was there for those who wanted to pay for it out of their check. Everything worked out great. Like I said, the providers were there. Premiums were down on most of the plans. So overall, this company saved roughly about 29%. So, and it really came out to roughly $30,000 in the first year annual savings for overall between the employer and employee cost. And so the employer anteed up some money and basically took their savings and a little bit more, and they redistributed to growth, which is perfect for the size company and their market that they're in. They wanted more revenue, so they were kind of going after that. Again, we were shooting for something better in this case, but because of the high risk was too high, we had to create some alternatives, but we definitely delivered on some savings and some opportunities there. even though we had, this is last year in 2024, we had a prospect that was about 480 employees, and about 250 of those employees were enrolled on the plan. They were in a fully insured market, and we moved them to a self-funded plan. And it gives us a lot more leverage on things, right? And so some of the risk was present, so we were able to accommodate and work around that. But, we made some adjustments, moved them out of there. They were getting a second opinion is what it came down to, saying, hey, are we paying too much, right? So, through some adjustments, and of course, they're inheriting some of the risk, and it was a calculated risk. We had the CFO in the room, and he loved the numbers all day long. And ended up saving them about $400,000, right? And so what the employer ended up doing is they just took some of that savings and just contributed more on the new program. So it lowered the employees' costs, right? So now we moved them to a different program, doesn't jeopardize network or coverage or anything, and now the employees are paying less. Not a bad thing at all, right? The employees take home more of their paycheck to their kitchen table. And then they use a small portion of the balance of the savings, and they end up having a company party out of it. So they basically just took the money and respent it, and so, which is fine. But now they have an employee base that's a little bit happier, more productive, and the list goes on. But you never know where things are going to go, and so you always want to, maybe get that second opinion. I highly encourage everyone listening to this, no matter what size of the company. Definitely, look at other options, just because you've been with the same company, status quo, whatever it might be. But in some cases, right, the broker, the consultant you're working with, just maybe be selling you a bill of beans, right? We had one company that they were told that they were in a grandfather plan and they shouldn't switch, right? That was the selling point. And so every year they're just faced with this increase on a rich plan. And when I looked at it and said, yeah, it's not a grandfather plan. What do you mean it was not a grandfather plan? It's not. It's a new Affordable Care Act plan, a fully insured plan, right? And so it's not grandfather. They were furious because that's what they were told, right? And so that's why they never moved, because they had this fear of giving up something from the past that they wouldn't be able to get again, and that was completely further from the truth. But how would you know, right? And so it's annoying to find out later. It could also be that this consultant or broker, they're outside of their comfort zone when they look at other opportunities. They're forced to look at it because the employer's looking at it, so you're going to lose the business if you don't do something. And so they finally get there, but they sell against it all the time, right? And the other thing is some of these consultants don't have the resources for it. And that's why even some of my, so-called competitors, right, we share some of our resources with them so we can help them win business. It's the way the world goes around. But some of these brokers don't even have access to it, and so that means their employer doesn't have, their clients don't have access. So how are you going to know if you don't start asking the questions? So in some cases, you may want to go down that rabbit hole, right, and find something good out of it, and maybe walk the path with somebody that's already been through it. That's why I said get a second opinion, and you may have some results over it. I would say, even give us a call. We'll no obligation. We'll figure out if there's a solution there.